Hey there everybody, it's Carpo here, and I'm going to propose probably an extreme point of view for a lot of people, but it's one that I firmly believe, and that's that legalizing all drugs will reduce crime in this country significantly. It's not the only solution. We have a lot of problems, a lot of issues going on, but we have ample evidence to support that legalizing cannabis, at the very least, has reduced crime in many areas. Now, it's easy to say that, but I actually have the evidence here and statistics to back it up for what it's worth, because it seems like people aren't interested in statistics anymore. But Portugal, for example, which I believe in 2001, if I'm not mistaken, or somewhere around there, they legalized all drugs, and they have state-sponsored injection sites. There was a lot of backlash in the community, but there was a lot of support internationally, and a lot of curiosity over how it would turn out. Crime was reduced significantly. AIDS fell from I think 100 cases per million down to 4.4 cases. A lot of different, drug-related diseases, or I should say that diseases that you get from sharing needles, hepatitis, AIDS, were on the decline because of this. Now, it's faced its backlash, and it's had issues because the state isn't funding a lot of the injection sites. They haven't kept up to the task. And I don't know how strongly I feel about states even supporting that. In other words, I'd rather have a country legalize and then step away. But that's not going to happen. That's not how it's going to happen with alcohol or tobacco, so it's definitely not going to happen with other drugs. So I'll go ahead and just read this little paper so you can see where I'm coming from. And this is, for all the talk about crime in the South, crime on the border, and problems with cartels, I figured that this was very timely. Now, California legalized medicinally a long time ago, and they were a little late to the game on recreational. They tried. They finally got around to it, but they did some research on crime and statistics after cannabis was legalized, over the 15 years after they made medical cannabis available. So Gavrilova, along with fellow researchers Takawama Kamada and Floris Zoutman, studied data from the FBI's Uniform Crime Reports and Supplementary Homicide Records, covering 1994 to 2012. They found that among the border states, the effect of the change in law was largest in California, where there was a reduction of 15% in violent crime, and weakest in Arizona, where there was a fall of only 7%. The crimes most strongly affected were robbery, which fell by 19%, and murder, which dropped by 10%. Now, all of that can be correlation and not causation. In other words, those drops in crime could be attributed to other things, of course. So, there's no fact for sure that all of that was due to cannabis. However, this last part is. Homicides specifically related to cannabis, the cannabis trade, fell by an astonishing 41%. So over that 15-year period, homicides dropped by almost half. That's a very significant change, and it's one that's really hard to dispute. The thing is, once cartels aren't the only players in town, the only choice they have is to either get into the legal business or to drop their prices or to switch to another drug. And this is, of course, what's happened. A lot of cartels who used to distribute cannabis have now switched to even poppy production, try to compete with Afghanistan. It's also, it says medical marijuana legalization also has a lot of popular support. A 2010 Pew Research Center survey found that 73% of American voters back medical marijuana, including 80% of Democrats, 76% of independents, and 61% of Republicans. But the federal government doesn't recognize marijuana's medical potential, largely because the studies have been small so far, and there have been no large-scale clinical trials proving its medicinal value. Not yet. Now that the states have done their own thing, that's changing. Now the last part, regardless of how you feel about crime or statistics, every state wants to be wealthy. Every state wants to be able to take care of its own, and to be able to pay for its streets, to pay for upkeep, to pay for parks and maintenance, and all of these things. So, how has it worked out for states like mine, like Washington? It says, impact on tax revenue. Better than expected sales of marijuana in Colorado and Washington over the past several years have resulted in buoyant tax revenues. In 2015, Colorado collected more than $135 million in taxes and fees on medical and recreational marijuana. Sales in the state totaled over $996 million. Sales in North America grew 30% to $6.7 billion in 2016 and is projected to increase to $20.1 billion by 2021. According to the ArcView market research, local research supports this view as well. A report from the Colorado State University Pueblo's Institute of Cannabis Research recently found that the legal cannabis industry has contributed more than $58 million to the local economy, primarily through taxes and other fees. Should marijuana become legal on a federal level, the benefits to the economy could be exceptional. A report from the cannabis analytics company New Frontier suggests that federally legal pot could generate an additional $131.8 billion in aggregate federal tax revenue by 2025. But some people are just a little too stubborn to move past this ancient, archaic idea that cannabis is somehow a dangerous drug. But to each his own. The Marijuana Policy Group study in Nevada says that legalizing recreational marijuana in the state could support over 41,000 jobs till 2024 and generate over $1.7 billion in labor income. The ICF study estimates that at least 81,000 additional direct, indirect, and induced jobs in California as a result of legalized marijuana sales. It also projects an increase in total labor income by at least $3.5 billion. So, what? It's a bunch of numbers thrown around. But they're big numbers, and it's a lot of money. We now have the evidence to show that not only is it bringing in a lot of tax revenue for my state, but we haven't had any major increase in kids using cannabis. It hasn't caused any major problems. Some people say that there have been more traffic accidents since it was legalized that are related to cannabis. But I'm sure that's probably possible, especially with all the edibles. But really, we have to look at the big picture here. We're talking about nitpicking, something that really should be a freedom of each individual. But I'm just talking about cannabis here. When I said I wanted to legalize drugs, I mean all drugs. There are a lot of issues I have with heroin, cocaine, and amphetamines, but I also understand that these drugs will be used regardless of whether or not they are legal or not. It's irrelevant what kind of laws we place on these drugs. We've tried the tough love, we've tried to imprison people, we've tried to execute people, put them in prison for life for a joint. There have been so many ridiculous cases, but people continue to use, and use has remained consistent. And the people who choose to use will, regardless. So this is why perhaps it's not the most comfortable thing for us to imagine needle exchange programs. And of course we don't want pharmacies prescribing cocaine or amphetamines, but they already do. We're already giving our kids amphetamines, Ritalin, and people are taking Adderall and a variety of different compounds, which are basically the same thing. But that's for another story. We're adults in a world now where we have the evidence to support that cannabis is not a dangerous drug. But we continue to drag our feet. Many other countries that had cannabis illegal, along with the U.S., did so by request of the United States. Basically, we told people, we're not going to work with you unless you follow these rules, because nobody wants to be the bad guy, if everybody's the bad guy. But it was Harry Anslinger, and the the early adoption of the DEA, which basically wanted to, let's just say it wasn't the drugs that caused the laws. It was political in nature, and a lot of times racial in nature, as much as I hate to say it, because I know that stirs up a lot of different emotions and ideas, but I don't know what else to say, you know. I can walk down to the store now on the corner and buy an ounce of high-quality cannabis for $60. Old school brand. And you can go down for $15 and buy a little hash pen in a package, and it still blows my mind, because when I started smoking 25 years ago, I remember sitting around with my friends saying, man, can you imagine just walking in and buying different brands of cannabis in the store? And now we're there. And, you know, I guess cannabis kind of stands alone. I think it would be a good start. if not to legalize all drugs, at least to legalize cannabis. So those are my thoughts on the issue. Let me know what you think. Talk to y'all later. Be well.